Hello there. So I'm going to take a little walk, and I'd like to pick up where I left off last time on episode 1000, where I was making the point that everyone's right. We're all right. Everyone's opinion is correct for them. And I only made that film as a starting point. So let's go a bit deeper into it today. So when we understand that everyone's experience is valid because it's their experience, and that's how they determine what is right for them, we find ourselves in a world with so much conflict. And inevitably what happens is when one person's opinion clashes quite drastically with another's, that's where it begins. And we can all see where it ends up in terms of war and all sorts of other chronic situations whereby all sense has left the picture and people are literally powerless in the face of their own rage and pain. So that's what I want to look at a little bit today with this one. And it's been a particularly challenging time the last year or two, things coming up for people. And when I listen to astrologers that keep saying the same thing over and over again, all the stuff from the past that hasn't been dealt with is coming up for you to either hide from or face and deal with and grow and move on and evolve. That's the choice we have. And so I've been inward a lot lately, reflecting on all sorts of things. And it is often the case that when someone appears to be doing the least, that's actually when they're doing the most, because as we know from shamanism, nothing is as it seems. So, going through some conflicts myself, going through some conflicts, and I've always felt this. They're always springboards to growth, to evolution, to spiritual development. And it was getting in touch with quite a lot of anger that really spurred this on. And there's a guy called Marshall Rosenberg. I'm going to put his name in the description and the reference to at least one of his books. Obviously a deep thinking person, and it really bothered him the amount of conflict in the world, particularly because he comes from a Jewish tradition himself and experienced all sorts of well, you can imagine, can't you? I don't need to say any more than that, really. So he came up with something to deal with this, to address it, to help people move on and have breakthroughs. And he called it non-violent communication. And this is truly one of the most remarkable things that's happened in the last 100 years, his work. However, being a kind of a person that's always wanting to look at things, seeing how things can be improved, I do want to make a suggestion about this. Now, the thing about when you call something non-violent communication, unfortunately our subconscious mind, also known as the unconscious, it deletes the word none. So actually, in terms of your inner being, the part of you don't have day-to-day contact with, what is beneath the conscious mind, only hears the word violent communication, isn't it? The nons get deleted. which is why if you want to program yourself for a sleep experience with dreams, it's very important to make sure there are no negatives and to express everything in the present simple tense. And that's a film I'll be releasing soon, dealing with that subject. So I've come up with a new name for it, and I'm calling it compassionate communication, because that's actually what it is. It's communicating from the perspective or the point of view of compassion. And compassion actually means with passion. That's what the word means. It means you're passionate about something. You're passionate about being understood. So, Roxana and I made use of some of the techniques in one of his books. And it's not the first time I've come across this. It's known in the Traders NVC. More than 20 years ago I came across it, seen it had great value, got hold of a book, read about it, and like so often happens with things, it just got put off to one side and neglected and forgotten about. So great gratitude to Axar for bringing the subject up. So what we did is we'd been going through a series of challenges, and what I was able to understand is that there's something which is so incredibly important and it's so easy to overlook, and it's needs. So one of his primary theses, if you like, is he says all human beings have got needs. Now he defines needs in a very special way, and in fact this is where all the power in his work comes from, because for example, let me give you an extreme example. Supposing you've got a situation with two people and they've got domestic violence going on. One person is being violated and the other person is perpetrating the violence. In a domestic situation like that, if you were to go to the person that would identify as a victim and you ask them what their needs are, it would be simply, I want my partner to stop being violent to me. And of course, that's exactly what they would want. However, that is not the way to understand the need in terms of what Marshall is talking about. What he's suggesting is to look at it in a much more interesting way. So needs are best understood in the way I'm going to explain now. When he talks about a need, he's talking about something that can be expressed as something that all human beings require, and it's expressed in a positive frame of reference, important, and even more important, it's expressed in terms of the present, in terms of the now. This apparently is crucial for the understanding of what this process is all about. So it needs to be expressed in a positive context, and it needs to be expressed in terms of the here and now in the present tense. And when you do that, quite miraculous things happen. So let's go back to this example of the couple with the domestic violence situation. Of course, the person needs their partner to stop attacking them. Of course they do. That's exactly what they need. However, in order to better understand it, if we put it into positive language, into the present, then it comes across as rather differently. Because actually what that person needs, that person is being attacked, that person needs to feel safe. And that is a present time thing, because of course the person needs to feel safe in the here and now. Of course they do. So that's a way to start to work with what I call compassionate communication, what is known as NVC, and some quite remarkable things can happen. So as we worked with this, as we studied some of the books, and one of the first things that occurred to me doing so, and especially through studying the examples given, what is going on in human relationships so much of the time is that we are being influenced by things that have happened in the past. And most particularly, and anyone knows this who's ever been involved in counselling or any way to want to help people out with their relationship problems, it's to do with what happened long, long ago, almost always in childhood. And so this is where we start to find we can really make some progress, because when we're talking about relationships and needs, what we begin to discover is in any situation where there's some real difficulty in communication, where there's been some problems, it's been going on for a while, what's happening is that those two people, or more than two, it could be a group, it could be an entire society, they're being triggered by events from the past. And if we just keep it simple to two people in a friendship or a relationship of any kind whatsoever, when one of them gets triggered, it's because that other person has said and done something that has brought them, usually very abruptly and shockingly, into a past experience. And so I'll make a very slight digression here. Those of you who've been watching my films for a while knows that something I have suffered from and had treatment for is post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And it was just a month or two ago, I remember listening to someone on this subject, and they said, look, it's really simple. Everyone suffers from PTSD. If you have that understanding that the entire human race suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder, it starts to really help you to understand why we have such issues and difficulties in communication. So what has happened in many occasions with myself and Waxara, as an example, is that one of us has said or done something which has triggered a past memory. And what happens with PTSD, if you've ever watched any film where someone has got PTSD, you'll see the same thing. The classic one is this guy's on a bus and he hears a sound like a car backfiring. Suddenly he's in the war and people are shooting bullets all around him, and he drops to the floor and he's terrified. And it's a way to show you that when that person is triggered, as far as they're concerned, that person talking into the present suddenly has vanished. They're in the past. That's what it means. So it's a pretty major thing that happens to pretty much all of us at different times. So when something's been triggered like that, one of the first things you've got to realise is at that point, that person starts to react, possibly with anger or whatever it is, whatever way they react. A thing to understand, when someone gets angry with you, pissed off, upset, whatever, there's no point in trying to have any kind of a communication or conversation with them at that point. Because to be honest, they're not there anymore, they're lost. And they're lost in the past. Lost in the past. It's a horrible place to be. So when that happens, the thing to realise is the best thing you can do is to back off and give them some space. Let them calm down. Let them come round. And give them their own time. And if you're the one that's angry, you're the one that's terribly upset, you need to realise this as well. You need to give yourself time to calm down. And the rule about how much time is, when you feel that the triggering episode has ended, when you feel like you're calm, then it's possible to continue the conversation. So having gone off on your own, go back, have the conversation with that person, and that's fine. Now, of course, when one does so, it's perfectly possible to end up in a situation of feeling just as triggered as before. So what we want to do is we want to do something to address that and to prevent that from being the case. So this is where the compassionate communication comes in. The thing to remember is that we're all human beings. We've all got our challenges, all got our struggles, and what we need to do is to go straight into needs. So we've been having some challenging communications, and we've been studying the work of the wonderful guy Marshall Rosenberg, and what we did is we decided to give it a go and go for it. So that's exactly what we did. So what we did is as follows. We went straight into needs, and looking into needs from the perspective of let's frame everything in a positive manner, and let's phrase everything in the present time. And what we discovered, and it didn't even take that long, and this is the amazing thing about compassionate communication, when you do communicate with each other from a perspective of compassion, it's extraordinary the breakthroughs that you can get. So just closing the gate here. So what we realised, and it didn't take that long to work it out, we realised that there were 3 things that we both needed and we could both agree on. And the first need that we have is acceptance. And I would say this is a fundamental human need that all human beings require, is to be accepted for who they are. And let's face it, when we get off on one and we get into some arrogant status we can all get into, and it's like, if only everyone was like me, if only everyone saw things the way I do, what a bloody dismal world it would be if you think about it. Now imagine we were all clones with exactly the same thoughts and feelings and opinions, and we all agree with each other all the time. You get mass suicide, and no point in being alive, is there? It's differences, it's disagreements, it's differing opinions give us the opportunity to learn and to grow and evolve. So of course we require difference in our miraculous human race, but something that we all have as a fundamental need is a need to be accepted for who we are, the way we are in the present moment. And let's go back to this, you see. The thing about the needs, first of all, positive. Now acceptance passes this test, but also in the present tense. This is actually where it matters most of all. It's not so terribly important whether I was accepted in a conversation with someone 3 years ago. What matters most of all is to be accepted in the present moment, in the here and now. That's one fundamental human need, I suggest. So then the second one, and bearing in mind that we share a home together, this is completely obvious, but don't underestimate the power of any of these things. The second one was appreciation, and this is something that we've become very good at, and I do feel that Waxar has led the way in this in our relationship. She has got the most wonderful ability to appreciate things that I do or ways that I am, and I feel I've learned a great deal from her in this respect. So this is one of our strengths over the last so many years, is we have learnt, and we really have managed mastery over appreciation. And here's the thing, as we were having this conversation, as we realise these things, what is so important to understand is that in a sense it sounds ridiculous, because of course everyone wants acceptance, everyone wants appreciation, but when you're in the middle of a conflict, that might not be so obvious that that's the case. So I will say this, as we, to use neuro-linguistic programming term, as we chunk up to agreement, what they mean by that, when you chunk up to agreement, it means you rise up to a level where there's something you can agree on a big scale, because these are universal human needs I'm talking about here. So we reach the point of appreciation, and it's time for me to pause, because right there I'm now appreciating the view, and there's Glastonbury Tor. Isn't that just wonderful? Purported to be the heart centre of the planet in terms of all the wonderful energy lines that connect it to places all over the world. Great appreciation, thank you Glastonbury Tor. So then we came up with a third one, and the third one, I'm going to go on some limb here, I do feel this is an area that we both have real needs to work on, because we do well and then we do badly on this one, and that's respect. Because when someone is so different from you, it can be very easy when you get into an ego state to feel in some way superior. Oh, I'm superior, I can do this better, and that can start to lead to a loss of respect or an erosion of respect. So acceptance, appreciation and respect. So we, in our conversation, came to this point. We realised that we were both carrying a lot of pain from past events, PTSD and all the rest of it, and we were here in the here and now, in the present tense, actually able to articulate and agree on these three really important, significant needs, which I would suggest is what all human beings fundamentally are asking for in all of their interactions. So this was a really wonderful moment, and the way it was possible to tell that is how we felt about each other, bearing in mind we'd had conflict, and we'd now reached the point of feeling like, wow, yes. So this is, let's just have a little look there. This is what I call the power of understanding. And that's really the route to acceptance, appreciation and respect. When I can truly understand the perspective of another, when I can understand what it's like to be them, and they can understand what it's like to be me, and all these defense mechanisms, all these shields and weapons, metaphorically speaking, that we all drag around with us in our daily life, when they are all put down, and this actually relates to a wonderful tarot card which is called the Four of Swords, and it's Truce. When people put down their shields and their swords, metaphorically speaking, and in some cases literally. This is actually what happens at the conclusion of a war, isn't it? Either everyone is dead, or whoever is left puts down their shields and their swords, and they call a truce. And that is when the 1,000-petaled lotus in that card actually opens up the crown chakras of the parties involved, and they get reconnected to spirit, and they are in the presence of the miraculous. So that is what is possible through compassionate communication, through recognizing that we all suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. We all carry very deep pains from having been hurt, and it's fair to say approximately 90% of it comes from childhood. That's it, approximately 90% of all this stuff comes from childhood. Worth repeating that one more time. 90% of all human conflict is got to do with what happened, and it was unresolved from childhood. And here's the point is, we both felt so much better, and we felt the love being to flow more freely between us, and it was simply the best feeling. So I've merely introduced the subject here, and if you're interested, I would so heartily recommend getting hold of one of this dude's books. And also the other thing is, you can look him up on YouTube, because he's done a lot of workshops. He's done some amazing things. I mean, one of the most extraordinary for me was when he went into a community in which there were tribes in Nigeria, and they'd been slaughtering each other, killing each other's children. And he used these principles in that situation, and at first, having the different parties in the room say, "You murderer." It all starts off with one person saying, "You murderer." So they were very, very far from compassionate communication at that point, weren't they? It was blame, it was accusation, it was all that stuff, all that very, very human stuff that we're all so familiar with. We've all experienced in all of our relationships at different times. Yeah. So I suppose that's the other thing I want to say, is that's actually what you do, is you start to realise all the language which actually blocks communication, and definitely judgment, blame, accusation, all that stuff, guilt tripping, that all acts to prevent true communication from taking place. And he quickly realised that the people involved were carrying so much pain, and what he had to do, he had to be incredibly patient with them. Now this applies to people that have been murdering each other, and it can apply to people in relationships as well. There can be so much pain that has been manufactured over, it might be years. When we're talking about countries or tribes, it could be something that's been going on for generations, and what is required there is fantastic patience. And yet the point is, he's actually able to do this. He's actually had success with people in these situations, and so the tribe of people that had literally been murdering each other's children had a total breakthrough, and they did realise that they had needs in common, and when they're able to see what those needs were, that was when the miraculous actually did happen for those tribes, and they now live in peace. And so I want to conclude this film by saying that one of the things that people often wonder is, what are we here for? And I want to give you this answer, which comes from the extraterrestrial community. You human beings are here to resolve conflicts. Every time you resolve a conflict, whether it's between two human beings or tribes or nations or the whole planet. Every time you resolve any conflict, you actually have achieved what is your fundamental goal as human beings. And our conflict resolution is why we can say that the human race's existence on this planet has been a resounding success, because this keeps on happening. It keeps on happening that conflicts are being resolved. We live in incredibly exciting times, and it may seem at times as if, oh my goodness me, but it's also, well, hang on just a moment, because this is what is actually going on. Yes, all the dark stuff comes up to be revealed, to be worked on or suppressed, so it can be brought up again and worked on again. However, as a human race, we are achieving the miraculous. That's a resolution of conflicts, and the benefits are not just here on this planet. The benefits resonate throughout the entire universe. We are amazing as human beings. All the love to you.